Last night's game against Man United at the London Stadium was quite a dramatic game. It was an entertaining game, I guess, for the neutrals. And I think there were one or two neutrals in the crowd, plus an awful lot of Man United fans over in the West Ham end. But for the neutrals, I guess it was a very entertaining game. It was, even for us West Ham fans. And we were seconds away from a huge 3 points in this relegation fight that we find ourselves in, only for Man United to snatch a 96-minute equaliser. 96 minutes. We'll get onto that in a moment. Thomas Souček gave us the lead early in the second half, but Benjamin Sesko's late strike denied us a crucial victory, and a victory I think we would have fully justifiably deserved. West Ham, we started with a compact setup, replacing the recent success of 4-4-2 with a 4-5-1, 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1 formation. You take your pick. It was a mixture of those. And there were two specific reasons why we made, or Nuno made, this tactical change. The first, of course, is the fact that, as predicted, Pablo was indeed injured, so he wasn't available for the game, which left Nuno with two strikers available to him, Tati Castellanos and Callum Wilson. Now, to play both strikers from the start, it could have worked, but it could have also been a massive risk. If either were to pick up an injury, then there'll be no natural striker on the bench to replace them. So I guess that meant that one of them had to start on the bench. And obviously, with Tati being in, well, they're both in good form, but Tati was selected with Wilson being on the bench. That meant that when Tati was getting tired, Nuno could switch the striker and get a tiring Castellanos off and a fit and ready to go Callum Wilson on. And that's what he did. And I think that was quite valid. The other reason, of course, was to pack out the midfield in order to try and frustrate Man United and hit them on the break down the flanks, which is exactly what happened with the goal that we scored. West Ham, we defended with purpose, with discipline. We made it really difficult for Man U to find any clear openings. And the switch, flooding the midfield was the right tactic to take. Sure, Man United dominated possession in spells, but their end product was pretty much non-existent. Yeah, they had 10 shots on target? 10 shots, only of which 4 were on target, but hardly any that really tested Mads Hermansen in goal. Man United, they lacked a decisive final pass or a clinical finish, and West Ham's backline, particularly the centre-back pairing, stood firm. Dinos just seems to be getting better, and that's probably because he's got a better defender alongside him, because Disasi has been superb again. People worrying about Axel Disasi's match fitness, you need not worry. He's played, 2 games in, 4 days? And he was exceptional in both. Dinos had a superb game as well. But this was by far, it wasn't a one-sided game. It wasn't us all defending and Man United attacking. Far from it. Our composure allowed us to grow into the game. And after the break, we showed more confidence on the ball. Our passing was sharper, and our use of Jared Bowen and Crescencio Somerville on the flanks improved immensely. And then the goal. And that's where it came from. It came from Bowen doing some great work down the flank, getting the ball across, and Thomas Souček's close range finish put West Ham ahead early in the second half. It was the kind of goal that rewarded our persistence, and we deserved to be in front. The strike looked like it might be the match winner and would have been massive for our survival hopes. Thomas Souček is now the highest Czech goal scorer in the Premier League, with 39 goals, surpassing Patrick Berger of Liverpool. From that goal, we didn't immediately shrink back to invite pressure on us. Yeah, Man United continued to see a lot of the ball, but because we were crowding out the midfield, there was little room for them to be creative. We looked really comfortable. We looked comfortable without the ball. We weren't panicking. No indecisive moments. No rushing of our game plan. And being a goal down, it was down to Michael Carrick to make the changes he needed in order to get Man United on the front foot. He made a couple of changes. He brought Lenny Yoro on for Harry Maguire. That changed their defensive balance and allowed them to withstand some late pressure from West Ham before they scored their equaliser. And boy, oh boy, we had our chances. On several occasions, we broke free and had the chance to double our lead. The first, obviously, was the Callum Wilson chance, where he picked up the ball, carried it up to the 18-yard box, and all he had to do was square it to Magassa, who was busting a lung to get into the penalty area. But Wilson, I guess he saw a bonus payment in his eyes and he tried to score from the angle that he had, and he didn't succeed. If he'd have just laid that ball off to Magassa, we would have been 2-0 up and the game would have been over. But the introduction of Benjamin Sesko proved to be decisive for Man U. Sesko's late volley in the 6th minute of stoppage time turned the result from defeat for Man U to a draw for them. But why were we still playing in the 6th minute of added time is anyone's guess. Sure, the game stopped for VAR decisions, as well as a flurry of substitutions from both sides, but 7 minutes added time in total seemed to be way, way over the top. 7 minutes of added time, it sparked a bit of anger, especially amongst the fan base, because the match simply didn't contain enough stoppages to justify such a long extension. And yet, Simon Hooper still found a way to stretch the game in a moment that felt completely out of sync with the complete rhythm of the game. And for West Ham fans, it wasn't happening in a vacuum either. Hooper's got history. Hooper has built up a catalogue of contentious calls against West Ham, from the disallowed goal at Chelsea to the failure to award clear penalties in games against Liverpool and Aston Villa. So when he tacked on 7 minutes, it fed straight into a wider feeling that West Ham always seemed to be on the wrong end of judgment calls, turning what should have been routine timekeeping into another chapter of frustration and suspicion that Hooper wanted to give Man United the advantage. And it worked. In another universe, this is basically called cheating. We also made our own subs with primary aim of protecting the lead and managing the game's tempo. The focus was on fresh legs in midfield and shoring up our defence. That approach is understandable, given how much was riding on the outcome of this game. Wilson for Castellanos made absolute sense, and it gave us fresh impetus up front. Magassa for Potts in midfield also made sense, and we could see that Magassa had more of an engine on him than Potts. Fresh on, of course. But Magassa's just that type of player that demonstrates that he can be a bit of a box-to-box midfielder if needed, whereas Potts is more of a sitting defensive midfielder. And the very late subs of Malik Diouf, Jared Bone, and Crescencio Somerville to bring on Scarles, Traore, and Kyle Walker-Peters were perhaps the most decisive subs that Nuno made. Look, although I agree with the changes to bring on fresh legs again for those three players, perhaps Ollie Scarles would have been better to have had Kyle Walker-Peters ahead of him instead of Traore, so they could both double up on Mbeumo, who is the player that crossed the ball in order for Sesko to grab the late equaliser. So, right changes, perhaps. The only error was to put Traore on the left. I would have rather seen Traore where he normally plays on the right-hand side, and Kyle Walker-Peters has demonstrated that he can play on both flanks if need be, whether it be at right back, right midfield, or left midfield. Being a goal ahead and with just a minute left on the clock, West Ham substitutions were conservative, but it was aimed at game management, and Man United had to take risks, and they left themselves a little bit exposed at the back. Look, let's be honest though, a point against a team that was looking for their 5th win in a row is still, and aiming for Champions League football, is still something to be extremely pleased about, especially that not many of even our own fans really gave us much hope before the game even started. Some standout performances, you've got to be mentioning Thomas Souček, much maligned with so many social media channels around, saying that he was finished years ago, he's just no good for West Ham, doesn't have the skill, etc., etc. And again, he demonstrated just how crucial he is to this West Ham United side. A great goal scored, Always being in the box at the right time, his dominant display in midfield alongside the young Matthias Fernandes demonstrates that he remains an important part of this West Ham side. And as mentioned, he's now the top Czech goal scorer in the Premier League. He's been superb, an absolute superb servant for West Ham. The centre-back pairing also deserved a lot of praise. Both Dinos and Disasi were solid, organised, and made several important blocks and clearances. And our midfield engine of Souček, already mentioned, alongside Fernandes and Potts, worked tirelessly to break up play and protect the back line. Look, we keep on like this, and I really, really do feel our chances of Premier League survival grow with every game. Of course, as much as I hate to admit it, we are still reliant on teams around us to be losing. Forest are playing Wolves tonight. Who knows? If Forest don't get the result they want, then we might just be a step closer to trying to overtake them in the next few games coming up. But with Thomas Frank's dismissal at Spurs, they might just now have the momentum to pull away from the drop zone. But another thing worth mentioning about the game last night were the fans themselves. A full house, albeit complaints from West Ham fans suggesting that there were loads of Man United fans in the home end, but the atmosphere we created, which has been missing from that stadium for a long time, has got to be mentioned. The London Stadium was electric, loud, passionate, and fully behind the players from the first whistle to the last. The attendance was reported to be 62,400, nearly 62,500, and the noise level made the game feel massive, especially as the clock ticked into stoppage time. The crowd's reaction to every tackle, every clearance, every chance was amplified, and it kind of made the late equaliser all the more devastating, I guess. Look, dropping 2 points in such a manner, of course it hurts. The performance showed fight and organisation, but the inability to close out the game will sting and could have consequences in this relegation battle. There are positives, however, a lot of positives to take, and we can build on those. We're more solid in defence. The atmosphere at the stadium, if that can continue, will certainly help lift the team in our remaining home games and can certainly push us to Premier League safety. The games played since QPR have shown that we've got grit, determination, and our passion is back. We deserved more than just a draw last night, and let's hope we can keep this momentum to get in the final dozen games that we've got in order to get ourselves out of trouble.